Hey guys, Level Cap here, and today we have the Battlefield 5 patch notes for Update 5.0. This patch will update the game for all the new Pacific content dropping on October 31st. Now the first thing mentioned in the patch notes are just all the content that is dropping on the 31st. The 2 new maps, Pacific Storm Iwo Jima, 4 new weapons, the M1 Garand, Type 99 Arisaka, the Type 100, and the M1919 A6. Then they mentioned that the M3 Grease Gun, the Nambu Type 2A, the Type 97 LMG, and the M19A2 are all dropping as Tides of War content that you'll unlock later. As chapter rewards, the Jungle Carbine, the Type 94, and the Model 27 sidearm are also available for you to unlock as you progress down that road. The new factions coming are, of course, the US and Japan. The new battlefield pickups will be the Katana and the M2 Flamethrower. The new vehicles available will be the M4 Sherman tank, the Type 97, the LVT, and the Kami light amphibious tanks, the dinghy, the LCPV, which is the landing craft for the US, the MB Jeep, and the Type 95 transport vehicle. The new planes will consist of the F4U Corsair fighter and bomber variants and the Japanese Zero, both fighter and bomber variants. New reinforcements will be the rocket barrage tanks, the Sherman Calliope, and the Hachi. Now, for the most part, a lot of this information was previously available. DICE is just reconfirming it in the patch notes. What we didn't know, though, are all the nuance changes that are coming to the weapons, the balance, new features, all that kind of stuff. So let's get into all those details now. The first thing on the list is that players will now be able to inspect their primary and secondary weapons directly while playing. Simply hold down the Camarose button and press the reload button to take a look. This is a feature that's been requested for a long time, and especially now that DICE has really gone overboard with all the skins and cosmetic stuff, not having a way to inspect it in game has always seemed a little bit odd. So that is coming to the game finally. Flare guns are also seeing a bit of a balance change. Flares will now last longer. They haven't said specifically how much longer they're going to last, and vehicle flares will now cover a larger area. Unfortunately, DICE has not changed the resupply time on flares. This is something that can be absolutely cheesed in sort of narrow or more condensed game modes, where a scout class can just stand next to a couple of ammo boxes and fire flares indefinitely, not only keeping the enemy team perma-spotted, but also gaining tons and tons of points on the scoreboard without getting any kills. It's kind of a cheesy mechanic, and I hope DICE looks into this for the next patch. DICE fixed an issue where healing rates could stack between self-healing pouches and medical crates. Now only the highest rate will apply instead of doubling them up. They've also increased the medical crate aura regeneration rate to 16 hit points per second from 12 hit points per second as a result of healing rates no longer stacking. DICE has improved the detection of fire damage against soldiers. This will reduce situations where players can take fire damage while not being visibly close enough to the fire itself. This is a pretty bold claim. I hope DICE actually has fixed it, since it's rampant on many maps in the game. They've also increased the incendiary grenade radius to 4.5 meters from 4 meters to better match the incendiary effect. They've also increased the incendiary grenade damage duration to 7 seconds from 6.5 seconds, again to better match the effect. They fixed a bug that would sometimes cause the health and ammo crates to be deployed below the ground when deploying while prone. When it comes to balance changes, DICE has made quite a few weapon mechanics changes. They've increased the rate of fire on the Model 8 from 180 rounds per minute to 200, and from 200 to 225 with the trigger drop specialization. In my opinion, the Model 8 was one of the worst guns in the game, so seeing an update for it is most welcome. The Suomi got its recoil adjusted to better position it against the M1928A1, aka the Tommy gun. They reduced the vertical recoil from 0.72 to 0.69, and they've reduced the recoil pattern slightly. The Lewis gun has made a bit less accurate in its sustained fire to separate it more from the Bren. They increased the horizontal recoil from 0.45 to 0.48. DICE has also fixed an issue that made weapons much more accurate than they were supposed to be while burst firing, and with this fix they've also nerfed the horizontal recoil on the Beretta PG, so they've increased it from 0.3 to 0.375. And if you're using the ported barrel, they've increased it from 0.225 to 0.3. Regarding additional changes to optics, they've improved the visibility of the aperture sights against all backgrounds, and they've also improved the MP28 front sight to make it now thinner and easier to aim with. When it comes to soldier fixes, DICE has fixed an issue that would cause players to be seen as swimming through the air while on the ground. They also fixed an issue where players could be seen with very low animation quality in high density areas. They fixed a few soldier collision issues, one where you could sometimes collide with a soldier that was already dead on the ground, and they've also basically reduced the collision box so that as soon as you kill an enemy player, you will no longer be able to collide with them so that you can move past them. They've made improvements to the bleed out state that should decrease the chance of players getting permanently stuck in those bleed out states, which does still occasionally occur. They fixed an issue that would cause an infinite death state if a player was road-killed right after being revived. They fixed a bug that would not trigger the temporary slowdown penalty after using the bayonet charge. They fixed an issue where players would be able to jump while charging. Holding down the melee button also no longer blocks the sprint and jump input. They've improved the vaulting animation when players are using the revolver. They fixed an issue where soldiers would sometimes get blocked while vaulting over medium-sized obstacles. Players are no longer blocked from throwing health and ammo pouches while at the same time of firing a weapon at full auto. The firing will now correctly pause to throw a pouch. They improved soldier ragdoll behavior to decrease the risk of them getting the hanging from the hips bug. I'm sure we've all seen this quite a bit in our games. They fixed an issue where soldiers could get stuck against collision with hard-edged assets, like, for example, the edge of a bridge railing. They fixed an issue that would cause the revived players to be in the T-pose when the reviver cancels the revive animations. They fixed an issue that would allow medics to endlessly throw medical pouches at each other. I've gotten that one before, so I guess it's gone forever. They've added support, finally, to choose between pressing or double tapping to activate sliding. This was because they also have the crouch sprint mechanic in the game. They couldn't figure out what to do with the controls, and they came up with a, in my opinion, terrible solution for it. So now they're going back and allowing you to choose as a player how you want to bind your keys. They've increased the sliding cooldown to 2 seconds from 1.5 seconds. They fixed an issue where soldiers would sometimes teleport to an old position when exiting a vehicle. They also fixed an issue where a soldier could vault through ceilings above stairs on Operation Underground. Also, players that die in shallow water can now be revived. However, players can no longer get revived while in midair, which would cause players to end up under the train in some rare cases. Let's move on to vehicle changes. The Ju-88 bottom gunner now properly shows hit markers when the gunner is doing damage. They fixed a rare bug that would cause players to spawn into the world without a plane even after they had selected a plane from the deployment screen. The Churchill Mark 7 Top Gunner turret no longer looks broken if the player is using the cover function from certain directions. They've improved the animation from the third person when a player switches seats in an airplane. Mounted and coaxial machine guns are going through some pretty significant redesigns. Basically, the guns are all going to get easier to use, but slightly less effective at range in the initial volley of fire. The guns will have increased accuracy after firing for a longer period of time, and their overheat time has been adjusted to accommodate for this. They'll also have faster muzzle velocity so they can more consistently hit moving, running targets. Basically, these guns are going to get easier to use, but because they're going to start off with a little bit less accuracy, it'll give players, especially at distance, some time to try and react before they're instantly killed. DICE has reduced the rate of fire for all bomb loads of 4 or more, but in general, the bombs are going to have a more effective blast radius. The design of this is to have a better distinction between bomb types so that pilots can actually pick between one or the other depending on the target that they're going for and have it be more meaningful. Turrets, which I'm imagining means tank turrets, speeds have been adjusted and the acceleration and deceleration curves are adjusted to be more responsive. This could actually be really good. I've always felt like tanks just feel kind of clunky and cumbersome to use. The bomb sight accuracy has been improved in the first and third person camera, but the biggest improvement is to the first person view. Holding the fire button while dropping multiple bombs will now update the target position for each bomb that is dropped. DICE has reduced the overheat and adjusted the explosive damage of the anti-aircraft guns for consistent hit damage against bombers and fighters. Players should now get consistent damage against all aircraft types, and AA can now destroy an aircraft flying directly at the AA without overheating. Aircraft will need to be more crafty and dodge and evade more stationary AA rather than simply absorbing the damage as they could do previously. This is actually a huge change to the game that's just sort of stuck into the patch notes there. Granted, DICE has changed the anti-aircraft balance in this game more times than I can count. Their understanding of the air versus ground meta has been terrible in the past. Hopefully this change is actually effective and people on the ground can fight back against the air and not just with the new rocket launcher that they've added to the game. Bomb shockwave time has been increased so that planes have a better chance to escape the shockwave of their own bombs when dropped at low altitudes. They've improved the handling of the Kugelwagen so that it should be a little bit easier to drive around. Now, DICE has also made an extensive list of changes to maps in the game. A lot of these changes revolve around fixing exploits where players could get on top of things, behind things, out of bounds. A lot of them are also related to spawning locations, some of them being out of bounds or in weird locations, adjusting the positioning of certain stationary weapons that were just bugging out and things like that. If you want the full list, you can go ahead and check the patch notes linked in the video description. It's very extensive and most of them are minor, but still important changes. Likewise, there's also been a bunch of improvements to Spectator Mode, although I'm not going to mention them here. When it comes to general audio improvements, DICE tweaked the stereo output configuration to deliver a more balanced and readable down mix from the native surround mix, which increased low frequency response and improved clarity for sounds behind and outside the player's visual perspective. Any improvements to the audio in this game are welcome for me. I've been having a really hard time reading footsteps among all the other audio clutter. So anything that makes this better, great. They've also tweaked how vehicle, explosion, and weapon audio attenuates over distance with the aim of delivering higher consistency and a tighter, clearer mix. They've increased directionality in close to mid-range weapon audio. They've normalized the distance delay on loud sounds like weapons and explosions with more physical, believable behavior. In most cases, this equates to a shorter delay. They've tweaked the content of close supersonic bullet pass-bys for assault rifles to be clear and consistent when compared to other weapon types. So if bullets are whizzing past your head, you should have a better idea of what type of gun somebody might be shooting at you, or at least be able to tell a sniper rifle from an assault rifle. They've tweaked the processing of first-person weapon audio to deliver a more snappy and punchy sound. Basically, this means stronger initial transient and compression of the weapon audio prior to the master output. If you're an audio dude, you probably understand what that means. They made a fix where the final audio mix was corrupted or distorted due to performance fluctuations. They smoothed the transition from gameplay to deploy screen and vice versa. They've made numerous improvements to the third-person movement, aka footstep improvements, including rebuilding the streamline in logic and mixing behaviors from the ground up for improved stability and consistency and readability. I don't entirely know what that means, but hopefully it just means footsteps will be easier to read. Third-person footsteps on average are louder. Great, fantastic. They've reduced the volume difference between slow, regular, and sprinting speeds. They've reduced the volume difference between material types. They reduced the effects of obstruction had on footstep volume. They've increased the mix difference between friendly and enemy footsteps in terms of volume, sense of weight, and distance drop-off. Enemy footsteps now have a higher priority in the mix and are now able to reduce other lower or distant sounds in order to cut through the general combat soundscape more often. They fixed instances of missing triggers for various movements-based sounds. Stutter stepping will more consistently cause triggers. All non-footstep movement sounds such as vaulting, climbing, wall impacts, jumping, stance changes, crawling, equipment, and weapon add movements are not down prioritized for performance reasons anymore and play as consistent packages together with footsteps now. Now, everything I just read here sounds very promising. I felt like the audio in Battlefield 5 has been some of the worst in any Battlefield game in terms of how the actual engine works and how it mixes it together. For a long time, I've theorized that, certain footstep sounds or vehicle sounds or whatever just wouldn't play because they didn't make it into the priority of the sound queue. And based on the patch notes here, it does sound like DICE has a sound queue and things are getting triggered in different priorities, or the triggers just aren't triggering at all. So I believe sound effects previously just weren't playing important ones that you would have need to recognize incoming soldiers and stuff like that. So if this can fix a lot of those issues, then fantastic. Now, when it comes to the UI fixes, there's again a huge long list of small updates, important updates nonetheless. I'm just going to cover a few of the important ones here. They have improved the kill cam, which previously sometimes, quote unquote, would not show the killer. I'm going to change that sometimes to just about every single effing time. The kill cam in BF5 has been garbage, so if this fixes it, fantastic. They fixed an assignment for the Carabin 1938M Mastery number 4. They've also changed a lot of the assignment text that was previously misleading or incorrect for a bunch of weapons, so that should hopefully lead to less confusion when trying to complete those objectives. Fortification building has gone through a lot of refinement to make it a little bit more consistent, less building objects behind other objects by accident or building things through walls by accident. They've also improved the building speed of things, which I agree with. This was some of my initial feedback on the fortification system. A few key binding changes have been made to PC. Players can use the new weapon inspect feature with a keybind on the keyboard if you want by hitting the I right now by default. Also, the sliding function can be bound to an entirely different key other than crouch if you like. X is by default on PC. There's a few Xbox and PlayStation specific improvements as well. And at the very end of the patch notes, they say, what's being worked on for the rest of the Chapter 5? Well, obviously the new map, Wake Island, is being worked on. And also they're working on community games, previously known as private games. This is the freaking third time that they've changed the name. So it's RSP, then it went to private games, and now it's community games. But that will be launching with Chapter 5. This is going to be an incredibly important part of the update here because it'll give players agency over servers that have decent map rotation. So you'll also be able to change in-game settings as well if you don't like what DICE has had there, but honestly I think just getting custom map rotations is going to be a huge change for the game. Anyway guys, thanks for listening to this extensive patch list. Again, I've left out a bunch of things that I didn't think were as important, but this list that I've given you here is long enough and these should be the main things you should be looking out for. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.